Here is a question that most people never dare to ask themselves seriously. What if the thing you call kindness is actually fear with good manners? We live in a world that celebrates agreeableness. Be nice. Be warm. Make people comfortable. Smooth things over. Apologize first. Fill the silence. And if you follow that script, if you have been following it your entire life, here is what tends to happen. You work hard and someone less agreeable takes the credit. You set a standard and someone tests it immediately because they calculated you wouldn't hold it. You speak your mind and then immediately soften it because you saw a flicker of displeasure on someone else's face. That is not virtue. That is programming. And Niccolo-Machiavelli, the most misunderstood strategist in Western history, spent his entire life documenting precisely how that programming is exploited. Machiavelli was not a villain. He was a diagnostician. Born in Florence in 1469, he served the Florentine Republic as a diplomat and military theorist for over a decade, negotiating with popes, emperors, and warlords. He watched power operate at the highest levels. He documented every pattern. And what he found ran counter to every moral lesson about human nature he had been taught. He found that power does not reward goodness. It rewards positioning. It rewards perception. It rewards the person who controls the frame. Who decides what the situation means before anyone else does. His masterwork, The Prince, was not a celebration of cruelty. It was an autopsy of how soft people get outmaneuvered by strategic ones. And 500 years later, the autopsy findings have not changed. So today we are going to do something uncomfortable. We are going to stop pretending that strategic intelligence is somehow less noble than reflexive niceness. We are going to walk through 7 psychological upgrades drawn directly from Machiavelli's framework, not the pop culture version of Machiavelli, but the real one, sourced from The Prince, the discourses on Livy, his private letters, and the behavioral science research that has since confirmed his observations. These 7 upgrades will not turn you into someone cold, hostile, or manipulative. They will turn you into someone who is no longer easy to manipulate. There is a significant difference. Before we begin, Machiavelli had a phrase he used repeatedly in his discourses. He called it knowing the nature of the times. He meant, you cannot operate effectively if you refuse to see things as they actually are. The times require strategic intelligence. The times have always required strategic intelligence. The person who pretends otherwise is not more virtuous. They are simply less prepared. Here is your first affirmation. Drop it in the comments. I choose leverage over approval. There is a behavioral pattern so deeply wired into most people that they do not even recognize it as a pattern. It operates below the level of conscious decision. It shows up in the half-second before you speak and makes you soften what you were about to say. It shows up in the moment someone challenges you and makes your first instinct explanation rather than silence. It shows up when tension rises in a room and makes you the person who diffuses it before it can do any useful work. Machiavelli called this the habit of the weak prince, the leader who prioritizes the comfort of the court over the clarity of the kingdom. In modern behavioral terms, researchers call it conflict avoidance reinforcement. Every time you relieve discomfort prematurely, you teach your nervous system that tension is a threat to be eliminated rather than a tool to be used. And that lesson accumulates. Over years, it becomes a reflex. You are no longer choosing to be agreeable. You are compelled to be. Here is what high-leverage individuals understand that agreeable people do not. Discomfort, in the right context, is information about power. When you allow tension to exist, when you create a moment of friction by saying something direct, holding a boundary, or simply refusing to fill silence, you get data. You see who flinches. You see who recalibrates. You see who fills the silence for you. You see who suddenly starts explaining themselves. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote in The Prince that the prince must avoid those things which will make him hated or despised. The common misreading is that this means being nice. The actual reading is more precise, it means not being predictably reactive. Hatred comes from cruelty. Contempt comes from weakness. Neither serves you. What serves you is the composure that makes others unable to categorize you as either. Machiavelli, discourses on Livy, men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. The parallel truth, people are inclined to test those who seem eager to please. The person who seems difficult to destabilize will rarely be tested twice. The behavioral science on this is precise. Research by Dacher Keltner at UC Berkeley on social power and nonverbal communication found that high-status individuals show dramatically lower levels of reactive mirroring. They do not unconsciously adjust their posture, tone, or expression to match the emotional state of others around them. They set the emotional temperature of the room rather than inheriting it. This is not dominance through aggression. It is dominance through stillness. The person who remains the same under pressure as they are in ease communicates a single unmistakable message: I cannot be moved by tactics. And that message changes how people approach them. Your practical protocol for this strategy: identify the 3 situations in your regular life where you most consistently relieve tension prematurely. The meeting where you laugh off the challenging question. The relationship where you apologize first to end the silence. The negotiation where you volunteer concessions no one asked for. Those are your 3 growth edges. In each one, the upgrade is identical. Pause, hold, and let the discomfort do its diagnostic work before you move. In his private letters written from exile between 1513 and 1517, Machiavelli described something he observed in every powerful figure he had encountered across his diplomatic career. He called it the quality of not needing the room. He meant the capacity to hold a position, make a decision, or communicate an intention without requiring the room's immediate agreement to feel secure in it. Modern psychology has named this construct internal locus of control, first identified by Julian Rotter in 1954. Individuals with a strong internal locus of control attribute their outcomes to their own decisions and capabilities rather than external feedback or others' approval. And the research that followed Rotter's original work is unambiguous. Internal locus of control correlates with higher negotiation outcomes, stronger leadership effectiveness, and significantly reduced susceptibility to social manipulation. Here is the mechanism Machiavelli identified. Approval dependence creates a predictable behavioral pattern. When you need positive feedback immediately, your adversary, anyone negotiating against your interests, can see your need and calibrate their strategy to exploit it. They withhold approval at strategic moments to create anxiety. They grant it at strategic moments to create loyalty. They have mapped your psychological circuitry and they are running it like a program. The antidote is not indifference to others. It is the transfer of your measurement system. Instead of measuring your value by the reaction speed and warmth of the people around you, you begin measuring by alignment. Is this decision aligned with my actual objectives? Is this position aligned with my actual values? Is this behavior aligned with the reputation I intend to build? Those questions do not require anyone else to answer them. And when your entire measurement system stops requiring external input, you stop being steerable. Machiavelli's most counterintuitive observation on this point: the people who tried hardest to be liked in the courts he observed were the most frequently betrayed. Because everyone knew exactly what they needed and could give or withhold it strategically. The people who seemed genuinely indifferent to whether they were liked or not were approached with far more care. Their loyalty was uncertain. Their reactions were unpredictable. And in a world of strategic actors, unpredictability is the most expensive insurance policy available. This is not a call to become cold or withholding. It is a call to become self-anchored. The warm person who does not need your approval is far more influential than the warm person who does. Because the warmth becomes a genuine gift rather than a compulsion, and gifts given freely carry far more weight than those given anxiously. Your upgrade here: for the next 7 days, practice completing interactions without seeking confirmation that they went well. End conversations without the clarifying follow-up. Send communications without the checking-in message. Make decisions without the reassurance loop. Each time you resist the pull toward validation, you are rewiring a deeply conditioned reflex. The discomfort is the evidence it is working. In Chapter 25 of The Prince, Machiavelli addresses fortuna, fate, circumstance, the unpredictable forces that arrive without warning. His prescription for dealing with fortuna is not reactivity. It is the disciplined preparation of systems so that when unexpected pressure arrives, the response is already architected. You are not improvising under pressure. You are executing a pre-designed protocol. This principle translates directly to interpersonal dynamics. The person who responds to provocation, challenge, or aggression with immediate emotional reaction is essentially improvising under the worst possible conditions. High arousal, compromised prefrontal function, and full visibility of their emotional state to the person who triggered them. They have handed the strategic advantage to their adversary. The neuroscience behind this is now well documented. Research by Matthew Lieberman and colleagues at UCLA on social cognition found that a brief period of deliberate pause between provocation and response, even as short as 3 to 5 seconds, dramatically reduces the amygdala's dominance over the decision-making process and returns the prefrontal cortex to primary control. In behavioral terms, a 5-second pause gives you back your strategic mind. Machiavelli's version of this was the observation that princes who acted in rage invariably regretted their actions, while those who acted in cold deliberation almost never did. The regrettable action is always the immediate one. The strategic action is always the considered one. From the discourses on Livy, the Romans never allowed a difficulty to arise to avoid a war, because they knew that wars don't disappear, they are only delayed to your disadvantage. The same principle applied to interpersonal conflict: delay is not avoidance. It is preparation. Here is the practical distinction that changes everything. Reactive delay, the freeze response under pressure, is weakness. Deliberate delay, the conscious choice to pace your response, is authority. The difference is entirely internal. In both cases you are not responding immediately. But in one case you are paralyzed, in the other you are composing. The external behavior may look similar. The internal state and the eventual outcome are completely different. When someone challenges you publicly and you pause before responding, the challenger immediately faces a problem. They do not know if you are composing a devastating answer, preparing a dismissal, or simply deciding the challenge does not warrant an immediate response. That uncertainty is entirely in your favor. They begin to doubt the strength of their own position. They may even soften it unprompted while you are still pausing. Your upgrade protocol introduced deliberate pauses in 3 specific contexts. In spoken conversations, count silently to 3 before responding to any statement designed to provoke, challenge, or pressure you. In written communications, wait a minimum of 20 minutes before responding to any emotionally charged message. In meetings, let at least one other person respond before you do. These are not passive behaviors. They are architectural changes to when and how you deploy your intelligence. There is a specific passage in the Discourses on Livy where Machiavelli makes an observation that most readers find unsettling the first time they encounter it. He writes that the prince who rewards everyone equally teaches his court that effort and negligence carry equal consequence. And when effort and negligence carry equal consequence, effort becomes irrational. This is not callousness. This is behavioral architecture. What Machiavelli understood, and what decades of behavioral reinforcement research has since confirmed, is that indiscriminate reward destroys the signal value of reward. If your kindness, your time, your support, and your warmth are available to everyone in equal measure regardless of what they bring to the relationship, those things stop being valuable. They become ambient noise. They become assumed. They stop producing any behavioral response in others. The economic concept that underlies this is straightforward. Scarcity drives perceived value. This is true of commodities, of attention, and of human qualities. The mentor who accepts every student is appreciated by none. The colleague who agrees with every proposal is trusted by no one. The friend who is always available is taken for granted by most. This is not because people are ungrateful. It is because the human brain calculates value through comparison and rarity, not through abundance. Machiavelli's prescription for this was not cruelty but calibration. He advised distributing rewards, including emotional warmth, support, and trust, in direct proportion to demonstrated alignment. This does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming intentional. The warmth you extend to someone who has earned it through consistent integrity carries 10 times the weight of the same warmth extended automatically to anyone who crosses your path. The Prince, Chapter 16. It is much safer to be feared than loved when, of the two, either must be dispensed with. The common misreading is that Machiavelli preferred fear. What he actually observed was that love based on obligation is fragile, love based on earned respect is durable. Here is the specific behavioral protocol. Identify the top 5 people in your professional and personal life. For each, ask 2 questions. First, is this relationship balanced? Is the quality of investment roughly mutual? Second, is my support in this relationship functioning as an earned signal or as an assumed entitlement? Where the answers reveal imbalance, do not withdraw dramatically. Simply slow the automatic. Pause before you offer. Create a small moment of scarcity. Observe the behavioral shift. You will find, consistently, that the introduction of even slight unpredictability in your generosity causes others to recalibrate. They become more attentive. They invest more deliberately. They begin to see your warmth as something to earn rather than a utility to consume. That shift, multiplied across all your relationships, fundamentally changes your leverage without changing your character. Machiavelli, in his diplomatic dispatches to the Florentine Signoria, repeatedly described a tactic used by the most effective negotiators he had encountered, a tactic he called the deliberate incompletion. These negotiators would end conversation slightly before the natural resolution point. They would leave one thread deliberately unresolved. They would answer a question with a partial answer and then move the conversation forward. And the effect, he observed, was that they occupied far more psychological real estate in the minds of their counterparts than negotiators who completed every thought to its full resolution. This is now well understood in behavioral psychology as the Zeigarnik effect, identified by Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik in 1927. Her research demonstrated that the human brain allocates significantly more cognitive resources to unfinished tasks and unresolved interactions than to completed ones. An incomplete conversation occupies the mind long after it ends. A fully resolved one evaporates almost immediately. Most people do the opposite of this. They over-explain. They chase understanding to the point of transparency. They want every interaction to end with all parties feeling fully informed, fully comfortable, and fully aligned. And while this instinct comes from a reasonable desire to be understood, its strategic effect is the complete erasure of psychological gravity. When you explain everything, there is nothing left for the other person to think about. You have done all the intellectual work for them. You have handed them resolution and they have filed you away. The strategic alternative does not mean being vague, evasive, or deliberately confusing. It means being concise. It means giving a direct, minimal answer and stopping there. It means allowing the space after your statement to work. It means trusting that your position is strong enough to stand on its own without a full supporting argument. Machiavelli made a precise observation about this in his notes on Cesare Borgia's negotiation style. Borgia never justified decisions he had already made. He announced them. The justification, he understood, was an invitation to counter-argument. The announcement was a fait accompli, it closed the debate before the debate began. Consider the last time someone gave you a genuinely cryptic but powerful response. Not evasive, just precise and complete, with none of the reassurance you expected. You probably spent time afterward replaying their words. You probably assigned them more intelligence and depth than you might have if they had over-explained. That is the Zeigarnik effect working in their favor. They occupied your mind's background processor simply by not filling every available space. Your upgrade, in your next 5 significant interactions, practice the disciplined stop. Give your answer. Then stop. Do not add the softening qualifier. Do not add the follow-up justification. Do not add the reassurance that you hope they understand. Simply stop. Notice what the space produces. Notice how it recalibrates the dynamic. Here is the single most important perceptual shift in this entire framework. Every conversation you have, every exchange, every meeting, every casual interaction, is a micro-negotiation about status. This is not cynicism. It is biology. Research on social hierarchy and dominance behavior, from Maslow's later work on self-actualization to Fronster-Wall's extensive primatological studies, consistently finds that human beings are continuously and unconsciously tracking relative status in every social interaction. The question is not whether status is being negotiated. It always is. The question is whether you are conscious of it or not. Unconscious participants in status dynamics tend to be positioned by others. Conscious participants tend to position themselves. Machiavelli's fundamental contribution to interpersonal strategy was this: stop being an unconscious participant. He described this in the discourses as knowing the nature of the lion and the fox, understanding when raw assertion is appropriate and strategic maneuvering serves better. But before you can deploy either, you must first accurately read what kind of terrain you are operating on. And most people cannot read it because they are too busy being emotionally present in the interaction to observe it analytically. Here are the key observational metrics Machiavelli would have recognized across the courts of Italy and that behavioral scientists have since formalized. First, effort asymmetry. Who is working harder to maintain the interaction? The person investing more effort to sustain the connection is positioning themselves lower. Second, adjustment asymmetry. Who is adapting their tone, language, and posture to match the other? The adapter is submitting to the frame of the non-adapter. Third, attention asymmetry. Whose statements are listened to versus talked over? Whose questions are answered with full engagement versus deflected? None of these asymmetries are permanent. All of them can be shifted. But you can only shift them if you can see them. And you can only see them if you are observing as a strategist rather than participating as a reactor. Machiavelli's specific advice on power imbalance in relationships was elegant in its simplicity: never allow a disadvantageous arrangement to persist unchallenged, but never correct it through confrontation. Correct it through gradual recalibration. If someone consistently dominates your conversations, reduce your contribution and observe whether they seek balance. If someone consistently dismisses your input, stop volunteering it and create scarcity. If someone consistently crosses your stated boundaries, reduce their access. None of these moves require a speech, a confrontation, or an announcement. They are architectural adjustments to the terms of the exchange. Over time, they restructure the relationship without drama. The upgrade. For 1 full week, enter every interaction with one question at the front of your mind. Where is energy flowing in this exchange? Who is contributing and who is consuming? You are not looking to create imbalance, you are looking to detect it. Because the first step to correcting disadvantageous positioning is simply the ability to see that it exists. In the final chapters of The Prince, Machiavelli makes his most sophisticated argument. He says that the prince who is known must be known on his own terms. Because the prince who allows others to define his reputation will always be defined by their interests, not his own. And in a world of competing interests, that means his reputation will become whatever is most useful to whoever is describing him. Reputation is not your character. Reputation is the story others tell about your character. And those two things can diverge dramatically depending on who is doing the telling. The passive person, the one who behaves consistently and hopes the right interpretation follows, is entrusting the most powerful form of leverage they have to other people's narratives. Machiavelli called this one of the most common and most costly errors a prince could make. The alternative is what behavioral economists now call identity signaling, the deliberate, consistent communication of who you are through behavioral choices rather than explicit statements. You do not tell people you are disciplined. You are on time, every time, without exception or apology when you are not. You do not tell people you enforce standards. You enforce them consistently, calmly, and without escalation until the enforcement itself becomes the expectation. You do not tell people you cannot be rattled. You demonstrate it under pressure repeatedly until the demonstration becomes the data point others use to predict your behavior. This is what Machiavelli meant by engineered perception. Not a mask. Not performance. The deliberate alignment of consistent behavior with intentional identity. Every action you take either reinforces or contradicts the reputation you intend to hold. And because most of these actions happen in small, ordinary moments rather than grand ones, the architecture is built invisibly through the accumulated weight of consistent choice. Machiavelli, The Prince, Chapter 18. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. The implication is not deception, it is that perception is the primary arena of influence, and you must compete in it deliberately. There is a compounding effect to intentional reputation design that Machiavelli identified and that modern influence research confirms. Once a reputation is established through consistent behavior, it begins to generate its own returns with decreasing effort. People behave toward you based on what they expect from you, and if what they expect is measured composure, consistent standards, and strategic intelligence, they pre-adjust their own behavior before the interaction begins. You do not have to enforce your standards repeatedly. The expectation enforces them for you. Your upgrade: answer 3 questions honestly, in writing. First, what do you intend your reputation to be in 3 words? Second, what is your reputation actually in 3 words, based on observable behavioral evidence? Third, what is the gap between those 2 answers, and which specific repeated behaviors are creating it? The gap between intended and actual reputation is always behavioral, and therefore always correctable. The correction does not require reinvention. It requires only the consistent alignment of small daily choices with the identity you have decided to hold. Let us bring the entire architecture together. Machiavelli did not write The Prince as a manual for villains. He wrote it from exile, stripped of position, stripped of power, stripped of the role he had devoted his life to serving, because he finally had nothing left to lose by telling the truth. The truth was not comfortable. The truth was that intelligence, goodness, and hard work are not sufficient for effective operation in a world populated by strategic actors. You need one more thing. You need to see the game that is actually being played and develop the capacity to play it consciously. The 7 upgrades we have covered today are not about becoming someone else. They are about removing the psychological software that has been running in the background of your behavior. The addiction to comfort, the dependence on immediate approval, the reactive pattern, the automatic generosity, the compulsion toward closure, the unconscious participation in power exchanges, and the passive management of your own reputation. Strip those 6 liabilities away and what you are left with is not a harder person. You are left with a more intentional one. Someone who chooses when to be warm instead of being warm compulsively. Someone who chooses when to explain instead of explaining reflexively. Someone who chooses how to be perceived instead of hoping to be interpreted correctly. Machiavelli wrote, in the closing lines of The Prince, this opportunity must not be allowed to pass, so that Italy, after so long a time, may behold its Redeemer. He was speaking of political liberation. But the principle scales down to every life, every relationship, every room you walk into. The opportunity is yours. It is in every interaction where you choose strategy over compulsion. It is in every moment where you choose positioning over approval. It is in every silence you allow to work instead of rushing to fill. Stop acting nice to survive. Start playing smart to lead. If something in this video shifted the way you see yourself in high-stakes situations, hit the like button. Subscribe so you do not miss the next strategic framework. And most importantly, share this with one person who has been playing the approval game their whole life. Because the greatest gift you can give someone you respect is a better set of tools. Drop your affirmation below. I play smart. I choose leverage. I design my authority.